Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! What a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Away win and clean sheet has Arsenal fans saying, new season, who dis? This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner, and we have a new season, and we won. We won away. We kept a clean sheet. 1-0 to the Arsenal, 1-0 to the 1-0 to the Arsenal. That's the song they were singing, and it was accurate. We kept the clean sheet. We got the win. Aubameyang is off the mark, and it's going to be a great season. I can just tell. I'm not sure we're going to go invincible, but I think you'd have to say it's a possibility. We got a full boat today. Paul's here, Tim's here, Clive's here. I'm going to introduce him. Scott will be here down the line. Just some quick homekeeping. No, that's not it. Housekeeping. Wednesday, we will do a new series on Patreon called, what's it called? That's it. Match Spotlight.
Deep dive.
That's keep the behind the scenes stuff behind the scenes. It's called Match Spotlight, Ainsley Maitland-Niles. What we're going to do is we're going to deep dive. There's the thing that Paul said, onto the performance of a specific player from a game. So this week we are going to do a statistical video chat deep dive on Maitland-Niles' performance against Newcastle, which was quite brilliant. You'll be hearing some of that today. Also, Tim has got a new feature for patrons this season. He's going to take you along with him to the games. Videos and photos of his day, his journey away, his trip to the stadium, what it's like to go and be there. So if you're someone who's always there, you will be familiar with what that is like. But if you're not someone who gets a chance to always go to the stadium, I think that'll be a really nice way to feel a part of it. So lots of new stuff coming up. We also have YouTube shows for everybody that'll be out this season. And thanks for anyone who joined me and Arsblog on the season preview YouTube video. That's still up if you want it. Okay, enough of me. Paul's on Twitter at Paz in My Pants. Hello, Paz. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
And Tim's on Twitter at Stillberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And let me just say to everyone listening, we are so excited to have you along for a new season. We can't wait to discuss it all with you, to discuss this game and everything that happens, the highs and the lows. We love you, and we appreciate you for being with us for another season. So with that having been said, Clive, I think everybody is kind of looking to see what Unai Emery does differently this season. Mixed reviews on his first season. Some people felt okay about the things he did. Some people less okay, but will he go back 3 or back 4? Will he be more willing to try the young players? We got a lot of answers right off the bat in the first day. He could have played Pepe. He could have thrown Luis right into the mix. He could have put Ceballos out there. He didn't. He played Nelson. He played Chambers. He played Willock, Guendouzi, who, I guess that one doesn't necessarily count. Maitland-Niles, he played the back 4. He didn't try to protect them with an extra defender. Just in terms of the character from the coach to have the courage to do that and what it tells young players at Arsenal right now, how important was that lineup?
I thought it was great what he did. And I do think a lot of it was really easily explained. I mean, as soon as the team came out, I just looked at it and went, okay, that's the team with the most minutes in its legs, and that's the team that's the fittest. And I didn't really look at what everyone else was saying, but obviously I think there must have been some uproar because people come back to me, oh, God, you said that you're so reasonable. I'm thinking, well, that's the only thing to say, surely. I mean, given we can't expect the names we wanted to see on the pitch when they've not done any sort of real significant training. So for me, the team was quite, I didn't foresee the Ozil thing appearing. And with Kalashnik going out as well, that took away the back 5 option almost. And so I thought it'd be a back 4. And I was just pleased to see the trust in the young players, particularly Nelson and Willock, really. Guendouzi we know about, but Nelson and Willock, that's a big thing. That's literally saying, Ramsey and Iwobi, you're now being replaced by 2 youngsters on the day, and let's see what we can do with it. And I thought it was really, really positive. Rather than lean into a name which gives you comfort, he leaned into the people that are the fittest, in the best shape, the sharpest, that could be molded into a team play and really give us a sense of speed and resilience and security away from home. And I've got to say, I was hopeful before the game, but afterwards, as an Arsenal fans, we all are, it makes you feel pleased that there is a pathway for young players to get into the first team and play meaningful minutes in a Premier League opener when in these world of hysteria, you lose that first game away from home and everyone's back on the negative train. But really, he did it. It worked out. They all played well. They all played to a shape and a pattern. And I thought it was great to see.
Yeah, I think it was fantastic. And I mean, look, on the one hand, you have to say some of these decisions were decisions he was kind of forced into at some level. I mean, it would almost arguably have been more aggressive to start guys like Pepe and Ceballos and Luiz, given the knock that they had, Ceballos had taken against Barca and the relative lack of playing time, and Luiz had just arrived. And so you could view these as sort of conservative picks. But I think, Tim, there is definitely a clear point with Emery that is a little different from Arsene Wenger. And that is that Arsene Wenger used preseason as a fitness exercise. And it was a chance to integrate youth into the team a little bit, but it didn't have a bearing on whether he planned to use them all the time necessarily. I don't think he used it as a true audition for a place in the squad. It does feel like the players Emery trusts in preseason have a chance to be part of the team in the regular season. I mean, that happened with Guendouzi last summer, and he featured a lot. And these players like Nelson and Willock, and Chambers certainly to a large extent, played quite a bit in preseason. He showed trust in them then, and he's showing trust in them now. So do you think that this is an indication that these players maybe do stand to be regular features in the first team, or once the new players are integrated, do you think just naturally the opportunities will dry up?
So I think it's kind of both. I think you're right. I was thinking that while you and Clive were talking. Actually, this kind of he obviously does put a lot of stock in what he sees in preseason, which is absolutely fine. That's kind of what preseason's for. But I was kind of taken by his comments around Callum Chambers, because if anything, I think the centre of defence. I don't think he was ever going to play Pepe, because he's barely even trained, let alone played. I think that would have been a really silly risk, particularly when he's got Reece Nelson and Mkhitaryan. Like we're not absolutely crying out for players there, and he had him on the bench. Ditto Lacazette. He's got Aubameyang up front. He had enough there. I don't think that was ever going to happen, and kind of ditto with Ceballos really. Willock's had a really good preseason. It just made total sense to play him. But actually, the one that grabbed me the most was, and I'm not surprised he did it, but he spoke about Callum Chambers actually, and he said, I think he said in as many words that Chambers and Socrates have played pre-season. They, beginning to look comfortable together. They've not really done a lot wrong in pre-season. So, yeah, I played them. And that would have been the easy one, I think. I think it would have been easy, even understandable, to put David Luiz straight in, because you've got a guy who, all right, he hasn't had pre-season with Arsenal, but he's had a pre-season and he's played lots of Premier League games, and he's played at St James's Park countless times. He could have come into that team without too many troubles. But I think ultimately Emery was right to stick with that partnership for this game. Not least, I mean, I'm sure we'll come on to this, to be honest, not to temper too much the happiness with a clean sheet. I think this is the worst attack in the Premier League, Newcastle's. So actually,
including some of the new players. I mean, Maxime, is that his name, or Maxime, who came on?
Yeah,
and Joe Elliton or Joe Ellington. I saw your tutorial earlier. Joe Ellington.
It's Joe Ellington.
Joe Ellington. Yeah, that's just. I don't hear the difference between what you're saying and what I'm saying, but okay.
But yeah, I mean, he scored 7 goals for Hoffenheim last season. I think he might be an okay player, but he's not much of a goal scorer. And yeah, the guy they brought on, he reminded me a bit of Adama Traore actually. He was quite lively, but I wasn't actually sure he was going to do anything.
Almiron was a little lively too. I mean, he's kind of a lot to handle.
Yeah, he is, and he had that little dive for the penalty and stuff. But I think they're completely toothless, Newcastle. I really do. I don't think Almiron's that. And so for our defence, if there's one away game this season to have a makeshift defence, to the not makeshift, but at least 3 of that back 4 could change in kind of by Christmas at least. Arguably maybe even all 4 of them, but I think Socrates will stay there. But yeah, keeping Chambers, I thought that was the key one, because with the youngsters, with Willock and Nelson, I thought, I said to you before kickoff, right? He'll use his substitutions. So some of the guys that are on the bench, they'll come on, And I think it would have almost have been pre-planned that Willock and Nelson, or at least expected, that they wouldn't last the whole 90 minutes. I think he was very much thinking, well, look, if I need to put Lacazette, if I need to put Pepe on after 60 and Lacazette after 70, I can do that. And those are probably the players I'll take off. And I think he just thought, look, we should have enough whereby this should be enough to beat Newcastle anyway. And if with 25 minutes to go it isn't, we've got guys we can bring on. But that's not going to happen with the centre halves. There wasn't really going to be anything other than injury, I think, that would have had Callum Chambers hooked or anything like that. So I think that was the really interesting one, because Luiz is physically ready, even if he's not fully acclimatised to Arsenal. And centre-back is just not a place where you make a change. So for me, that was, at least in the short term, a decent show of faith in Callum Chambers. And I think he repaid it as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. And I mean, look, you can talk about Newcastle being toothless, but we made far more toothless teams look dangerous last season. It was not above us to make defending look hard against the least impressive attacks in the league last season. So I'm not ruling anything out. And it's a tricky day. It was driving rain. I mean, you can probably speak to it more than I can, Tim, but that was a nasty day. And it almost looked, the interesting thing, sometimes attacking players like wet pitches because the ball really skips and moves. Am I right in thinking that there was enough water that it was starting to slow the ball's roll a little, or was it skipping off the ground pretty good?
A little bit, but also it was really, really windy. So I think that tempered some of the movement of the ball. I don't think, because of the way the stadium's built, the wind doesn't really whip in anyway, but it was super windy. So I think any zip that might have been added to the ball by the surface was probably tempered a little bit by the gusts, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the game just a little bit. And Paul, I mean, by dint of covering the performances of the young players, you'll obviously get your say on them, but do you want to make just a quick statement on the fact that they got the chance today or yesterday?
Yeah, I think it was great. I think the lineup made lots of sense. I couldn't honestly see David Luiz coming in. I mean, everything Tim says, as usual, is spot on the money. But two things with him. He only trained for 30 minutes. I think it was on the Friday. I think I heard on his interview or on his gym training video something like he hadn't got any sleep the night before the transfer. I mean, there was the visa thing. I just think there was too much of a turmoil. Plus, personality-wise, he's such a strong character and has such a defined way of playing. I'd have been shitting myself as a manager to just drop him in the middle of it, because if things went tits up, you got a very lively David Luiz telling everybody how they ought to be defending at Arsenal. I just saw a lot of risk, and as Tim pointed out, perhaps the manager had judged the attacking threat was not going to be our biggest issue from Newcastle. I think the other interesting thing on the Chambers part of it was that he played a very conservative, old-style centre-back role when you consider that to his Cruyff turns in the box in pre-season. He hoofed it clear quite often and did conservative passing, kept it kind of nicely locked down at the back. And it was a very different Chambers approach to the game that worked well for us. I mean, Socrates did the more adventurous play. Chambers kept it simple, made us look secure. So I think it was a very good day for that partnership and for Chambers. And from that, we could build a little confidence overall. Reece Nelson was another one where there was a lot of discussion on his performance. And as you said, we got Ainsley Maitland-Niles for the spotlight coming up. But the really contentious one for many people was Willock. Was he the best man on the pitch, or was he really quiet and barely saw the ball in a crowded space of the pitch? And I lean to the latter. I didn't think it was a brilliant performance from him. I think he showed a few things that reminded me why I have great hope for him. But I think it's a really tough game. Actually, it's a really tough game to assess almost anybody on, given the five-man midfield, how turgid the first half, how cautious we were.
Yeah.
So I think that's got to temper everything, whether you think somebody was great or terrible. This game is an absolute context, and I mean, you always need more than one game, but this game in particular was just this weird creation.
Yeah.
The second half was actually beginning to open up a little bit.
Well, we'll definitely get to the second half. I promise.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it was literally a game of two halves. But the first one, it's very hard to extract anything authoritative on it, on almost anybody's performance, I think. But we will.
Yeah. We'll definitely come to everybody's performance authoritatively. Well, let me ask you this just quickly, Paul, and because I sort of think that there are two players that wouldn't necessarily be the ones you'd most want to talk about in this game, but deserve it because I think that the conversation around their performances is maybe skewed from the reality. And one of them is Mkhitaryan. Definitely a part of that game of two halves issue that you discussed. I mean, clearly had a superior second half to the first half. I think the reason that Mkhitaryan is so difficult for me to analyze is he gets so many easy things wrong. And having a player on the pitch who gets so many easy things wrong is bad for many teams, but for a team that has defensive frailties, you just can't have a guy constantly turning the ball over. I read that he had 15 turnovers. He lost possession 15 times. Was it in the first half? 3 times as many as anybody in the entire game. That puts your defense under pressure. That gets counterattacks. That has everybody flowing back to their own goal, and that's dangerous. By the same token, he sent Aubameyang through for 2 good chances. He arrived on the end of a good move after Willock did a nice job to recover the ball, having lost it, got the ball into the channel to Nacho. Nacho gave it to Mkhitaryan. He blasts over from close range. He never quite got the end product right, but his movement and his involvement in attacks always has a direct and progressive influence. And so for you, do you think that the negative criticism of him is warranted given the mistakes or over the top given what he tries to do in the attacking third?
Well, at the moment, I lean towards the mistakes. The problem is this team desperately needed somebody like Mkhitaryan doing what Mkhitaryan was at least attempting to do. He's, to me, I mean, they're a bit different, but he's so much like Ramsey in what he brings to a team, and in how he builds, gets involved, speeds the play, quick passes, running ahead. He when we say there's nobody else who'll score goals apart from the front two before we got Pepe, actually there was Mkhitaryan, and he was on about the same goals and assist rate as Ramsey. And a reasonably informed Mkhitaryan is a pretty good Ramsey substitute. And that's what he was trying to do in this game. And he was god-awful in terms of completing simple or moderate passes. But he's still, while his execution's terrible at the moment, he's trying to do all the right things. He's playing he's bad on the simple passes, but he's also trying to play those trickier passes, drive us forward, getting stuck into the game to move us forward, increase the rate at which we pass. Unfortunately, he was a giveaway machine, especially in the first half. So, but he's had a few moments in preseason and in this game where he reminds you what he can be and could be when he hits some form. Of course, towards the end of last year, he ran out of fizzle too. But there were a couple of months when you began to get the Mkhitaryan concept and what he brings to the team. I don't know if he's going to get back to that level, but he's kind of a player who started last year slowly, then kicked in. And when he gets some form, I mean, he really drives us on. He's a jack in the box, a joker, makes things happen. And you need players like that.
Yeah.
I think it's also good to have we'll need some players who are willing to share time, and Mkhitaryan can do that. He can also put in long stints. He can play many 90-minute games pretty much back to back.
Yeah. He was still running hard at the 90th minute. I mean, he is in impressive shape, all things considered.
Yeah, and I think if he can, I think we should make sure it doesn't become a little toxic between us and him. I know nobody's listening to me, but he could become.
I'm not. Are you still talking?
No.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. He could become an important player to us, albeit not an automatic starter all the time.
Yeah.
If he can just get up a little further in terms of the level he brings, or coming on at 70 minutes or 60 minutes, or he hits some form and he starts. So. I still have hopes that he can have a significant contribution. But yeah, this was such a frustrating game to watch him, especially because he was just contributing to the fact that we couldn't drive ourselves forward and create anything.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think there is definitely a point where players who make some mistakes but add a lot to the attack have value. Like Alexis Sanchez. Alexis Sanchez was never as bad as people pretend he was, even at his worst at Arsenal. He was never that bad because he always added so much in terms of expected goals and assists, or just actual goals and assists if you prefer. But like there is a point at which you're making more mistakes than the team can tolerate, and it overcomes whatever positive influences you have on the attack. So you look at Mkhitaryan, he sent Aubameyang in twice. He got on the end of a good move and had a chance to score a goal, and that's great. It would have been better if he had actually scored the goal. But like when you have 73% passing and you've given the ball to the other team 15 times, that's probably where you have to draw the line. Now, to be fair, Joe Willock also had 73% passing, and we can come to him in a minute. But Clive, there's another player who divides opinion and who's coming in for some criticism in this game, and he's a player that I'm actually prepared to be more aggressive defending in this game. When I watched the game the first time, I had my usual Granit Xhaka reaction. Here he goes, giving the ball away. Oh, look, a dumb yellow card. Oh, typical Granit Xhaka. When are we going to move away from him? Because I saw the things I look for when I watch Granit Xhaka. But then I watched the game again, trademark Paul, and I saw a gorgeous ball, like a wrapping long ball, through ball type thing at the end of the first half, right into Aubameyang on stride, who a struck shot sweetly to be saved by the keeper. I saw him make numerous good progressive passes. I saw him control possession later in the game. And I have to admit, he did a lot more than I thought. So since I don't really know anything, can you tell me the right way to watch Granit Xhaka and how you felt about this performance and his influence on our midfield?
Well, big up to you for actually noticing that he had a great game. Great may be too much of a word, but he played really, really well. So I think the question, Elliot, is best answered by what's going on in our centre midfield. I noticed at Lyon, and fair enough, I was in the North Bank end at the Emirates Cup, and I could see Arsenal progressing down the pitch, almost like with a magic square in a box-shaped midfield. And what was really noticeable is there were two in the pivot and two ahead. And the two ahead were receiving the ball a lot back to goal. And there's a definitive pattern. So they used to pop it forward, get it back. It's not quite there. Create a bit of space, pop it forward. Then that attacking midfield, whether it be Nelson or Mkhitaryan, would turn and drive, and everything would accelerate. Whereas last year, I thought we went into wide areas much quicker. We're looking for the overloads, looking for triangles in wide areas, and we were cut back FC. This year, we're progressing higher down the middle, fullback to higher, and basically then we're going into wide areas, but then we're getting the ball across quicker, much sharper, rather than tip-tapping the corner. So this progression, that's changed Xhaka's role. He's no longer the single guy at the base doing everything, being the target. He's got two of them there, left and right. So him and Guendouzi sharing that pivot role, left and right. And Mkhitaryan and Nelson in the box ahead. And Willock being what I call an active running 10, going everywhere, trying to create triangles and overloads, right? So I really liked what they're doing from a pattern perspective. And if you notice when you watch the game the second time, how many tackles that Xhaka made in behind Monreal. So his duty was to progress from that left-hand side, but also cover the fullback. And then you think, okay, so now you've shared his role. He's not the target for the press. Newcastle were crap. Tim's absolutely right. They played a 3-5-1, 3-5-1-1 rather than a 3-5-2. Almiron buzzing around like a wasp and basically being just swatted aside. And Joe Linton, who wasn't as strong as powerful as I thought he would be. So Callum changed.
Clive, it's Joelinton.
Okay, sorry, mate.
Yeah.
But all the listeners would expect me to butcher that, and I have just done it. Right, so
what I'm saying.
and Tim is not even trying to save me, right? So basically, Joe Linton. Basically, I thought he'd be a bit quicker over the top, but he was one. It was 2 versus 1, and Chambers or Socrates could smash him, one dropping behind. They felt confident they could be outrun, so it's no problems there. So I do like what we're doing in centre mid. So let me project a bit further forward. So Xhaka, we know what he can do and what he can't do. It'd be interesting to see how Torreira fits into his shape, because that's not really his role, progressing the play from deep. That's going to be interesting. But I tell you who will fit into his shape. I'll tell you this right now. And this is Pepe. He's one of his key strengths. We've all seen the YouTubes. We've all seen him running through lines and slotting things at 100 miles an hour and great penalties and free kicks. But I'll tell you, I watched a YouTube of him playing against PSG last year, and his ability to receive the ball back to goal, manipulate the ball, roll out of pressure, and then spring inwardly is almost his number one skill. Receiving it, standing still, holding it on his safe side, and then accelerating from a standing start. He absolutely fits that box. Coming off the side, this is the new trend, right? They say you roll off the sides into midfield, create an overload. You don't even have a centre forward. You refill, you roll into the central areas, you build play, and you go into wide areas, second phase, and you dominate from there. It's all about that first pass through the line at pace, spotting it quickly, and those forward players have got to create a pathway to receive it. And all the Newcastle players got to do is try and stop the entry pass, and they couldn't do it. Nelson had touches, Mkhitaryan had touches. They were Nelson was more secure on the day, so Arsenal fans are thinking, Mkhitaryan, he lost it so many times. Nelson was much better, but actually there's a pattern here that we can now project forward with better players, more consistent players, and maybe more spectacular players for our home game. And I can really see what we're trying to do. I can really see it. And it's interesting if he sticks with this. I've seen it twice now. So it'd be interesting to see, is this the new way we're going to play? But if you suddenly put at the top of that box, if you put Aubameyang and Pepe at the top of that box, and they turn around, that's a whole new ball game. And they're laying it into Lacazette as a wall pass and getting it back at speed. So you can start to see where we're going. And then I can also start to see why Granit Xhaka will be in this team a lot, because entry passes into that part of the pitch is his trick. But now we're surrounding him with somebody else that can maybe do some of the receiving, personality, and the running around him. So he's only got half the job to do that he was doing last year. I thought the whole construct was really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I'll say too is you are at some level at the mercy of how the other team wants to play. And to your point, they packed the midfield. Newcastle packed the midfield. They really just wanted to disrupt the game in central spaces, and they did that. And we didn't have a lot of access. I mean, if you look at our leading passing combinations, it's Socrates to Chambers, it's Xhaka to Monreal, it's Guendouzi to Maitland-Niles, it's Chambers to Socrates. I mean, we did a lot of U-shaped passing back there as we tried to find space. And to be fair, I think maybe Willock, if you wanted to bring him in for any criticism, it would be, I don't know that he's a 10 necessarily. And in this game, he sort of struggled to be able to find that open pocket of space, to drop into those spaces, to give Xhaka and Guendouzi a progressive pass to make. And so more often than not, they had to go to the fullbacks or back to the center back. So it took us a little while to pick that apart. And of course, getting a goal helps, because then the other team has to come out a little more. The space starts to open up, and we did find some openings after that. So, all in all, I think it's fine. Tim, I think, look, we're 27 or so minutes into this, and I think two of the stars of the game, Guendouzi and Maitland-Niles, haven't gotten a mention yet. So let's talk Maitland-Niles now for a bit. Now, obviously, midweek, we're going to do a deep dive on him in our match spotlight. But I think the one thing that is clear to me in Maitland-Niles is that he feels very confident with the ball at his feet, driving play forward. And whatever you think of him defensively, and I thought he made a couple very, very good interventions, stand-up tackles, and was switched on the whole game. The pace he has to cover ground that we saw in the way the goal was made, being switched on, seeing the opportunity, accelerating, intercepting, and then a really classy, nice ball right into Aubameyang over the defenders and in space. The attacking side of his game has really come around, and I was just really, really impressed with this game. I know that there are still questions about him defensively, but for me, I think we're seeing a player that's starting to show that he is going to have a first team career at fullback, whether that's behind Bellerin or even pushing Bellerin. I think too early to say that. What did you like about his game against Newcastle?
What I really liked about the way he set the goal up, we know, because he's a midfielder. We know he's technically accomplished. Once he got into that position, and I was behind the goal that Aubameyang scored at, in about the 15th tier, so I had like a really good literal bird's eye view of it. But like once he got into that position, I never doubted he'd get the pass, because I know that he's technically accomplished. I know he's good with the ball at his feet. I know he's pretty rapid. But what I really liked was, and you said it yourself, that he was switched on. That actually, when you look at it, it would have been so easy for him not to go for that pass, because it was like slightly undercooked. It wasn't terrible. I think most of the time that pass just kind of makes it through, and your fullback just goes, no, I'm gonna sit here, not get exposed, and I'm just gonna sit here and do my job. And absolutely nobody would have said a thing if he'd have done that. It would have completely escaped our notice if Maitland-Niles just stays in his position, lets that slightly underhit pass go, and we never even realise the fact that there's an opportunity there. So that's what I liked most, that he was so switched on, and that he was, he's always been calm, but sometimes he's like, do you know the expression, so laid back you'll fall over?
Yeah.
That's what happens sometimes. He kind of literally falls over because he's too relaxed. But this time it was switched on, afterburners on, and none of the Newcastle defence realised it either. And what's wonderful about this goal is it's just the kind of goal we never score, where we create the transition, we create the turnover high up, and we hit them, with 3 or 4 touches, and it's in the net. It's just the type of goal we just haven't seen enough of over the years. And it was really, really enthusing that he was a big part of that, because you wouldn't necessarily say that's his strength. He's, like you say, he's a good stand-up tackler, knows how to use his physique quite well, good technically, but forcing turnovers and spotting things before they happen. In this context, it was great for us in an attacking, from an attacking point of view. But that, if he can keep doing that bodes really well from a defensive point of view, because that also means that you spot danger as well as opportunity, and that's what I want to see from him. I want to see him spotting that, on the edge of his own box, or in our half when things are looking a bit hairy. And the thing is about Maitland-Niles, I think he's quite inconsistent. Do you remember last season he had that absolute stinker against Everton?
Yeah. And
you thought, oh my God, he's finished. And then I think maybe we played Rennes in the next game and he was brilliant. And it's finding consistency for him now. I thought he was excellent in this game, but we know he has to play for the next couple of months pretty much every game. We know that at the moment. And that's what I really want to see from him. I really want to see him turn up again against Burnley and have a brilliant game against Burnley and a brilliant game against Liverpool. That's what he's missing, I think. I think he's got bags of potential, but I just don't think he puts it together on a regular enough basis yet. Yeah, but this was a good sign.
One thing I do like, though, is that he's a stand-up tackler. He doesn't go to ground. He very, very, very rarely goes to ground. And nothing drives me crazier than players that have pace who go to ground early. Because it's like, stay on your feet. If you miss a challenge, your pace will bail you out. You can recover. You can get back into position. Once you go to ground, you're out of the play. So, I like that he does that stand-up tackling. In the 85th minute, he had a phenomenal tackle at the end line that you can go back and watch. Just really good, clean tackling in the box, too. No danger. He also had to play, Kolasinac, love him or hate him, the one thing is he gets to that end line and just smashes it into the first defender. But there was a moment where Maitland-Niles got the ball in central midfield. I don't know why he picked it up there. It might have been a interception actually, but he collects the ball in central midfield and sees the open spaces on the right flank. So he drives all the way to the end line and he gets followed and he fakes the cross, remember, and he puts the guy on his ass and then just calmly steps inside him and slides a cut back to the penalty spot. I think it was the one where whoever he cut it back to tried a backflip across the back flick across the box, like a Cruyff turn type flick.
Yep. It was Nelson.
I think that was Nelson.
Was it now? Yeah. But I mean, just really good composed play to realize, like, I've got this guy on skates. He's gonna, I'll hit the brakes. He'll fly right by. It was a brilliant moment, and so I think it was a really nice reminder that Maitland-Niles is more than just physical ability and athleticism, but that he does have a head on his shoulders and he does understand circumstance. Clive, I'll let you jump in here just for a second because, to you, what I saw, me personally, is that we inverted our fullbacks to stop the counter. Is that something that you saw too?
See, Paul? See what happens in my life? So yeah, funny enough.
Am I wrong? That's just how I see football, Clive. I don't do you see it differently.
Well, mate, I'm just, I think you're absolutely spot on.
Oh, thank you, Clive.
So basically, if you listen to, I'll tell you what I picked up on. If you listen to the Five Live, there's a Five Live media day, and they spoke to Granit Xhaka about what you hope to see defensively this year. And he kept saying about being compact. It's obvious to me Arsenal have worked on their shape and distances in the centre of the pitch, and the position that Maitland-Niles has taken up was far narrower. So rather than when you have the ball, the mantra is you make the pitch big. They actually kept our distances small. So if the ball's on the other side, we're in good possession, and Monreal's got it. As the opposing fullback, what you do is you roll out to the other side, and you try to stretch teams. But Arsenal were a bit more cautious, and they kept narrower, and they kept him there. He's obviously got great recovery speed. So if Newcastle were to spring down the middle, we had bodies around. Did you notice? I'm sure you did. How many counter fouls we made on the counter attack, Man City style? You notice that? Early fouls. Okay, we got booked for all of them. But early fouls, and Newcastle didn't, by the way. With early fouls in the build-up, bang, exactly what other teams do to us and don't get booked. We were doing it. Lots of players did it, and we broke them down so they couldn't get momentum and waves of attack. And I thought it was clever. I thought there's a real defensive strategy in this game and real offensive pattern. We haven't really seen consistently, and I've seen it twice. I keep saying it, and I wonder if this is it, because when Maitland-Niles is tucked in just to the right of centre midfield, that's not a foreign position for him. That could be his best position, many will feel, and maybe a tip of a diamond on the right hand side.
And
so
Nacho's very comfortable at that too on the other side.
Very comfortable. And so they didn't scream to the corner flags unless they felt it was the right decision to go there. And when they went there, they were supported from behind. So I do think there's been some messages and some learning and some video sessions. It wasn't exciting, but just project forward to what we have this month with Liverpool, I think, and Spurs. We're going to need that shape. We're going to need that build up. That's good stuff. Right, so if we can keep building on this, I think it's a great building block. I really do. Yeah,
well said. And by the way, Clive, in the future, if you have something that like you saw in the game, just so that I don't repeat it and it doesn't become redundant, just put it in the Skype chat, and then that way, I'll know that it's something you want to talk about, and we won't wind up saying the same thing.
Okay.
Paul, let's do this. Since we're doing a whole pod just on Maitland-Niles, can we move on to Guendouzi? Mm-hmm. So, look, I fully admit that I saw Xhaka's game a little wrong. I fell victim to confirmation bias, and that it was a better game than I anticipated. And actually, on second viewing,
I fully admit you did too.
Thanks, Paul. But the one player who looked the same to me on second viewing as he did on the first is Guendouzi. He just bossed this game at times, and I thought he was a little slow in the beginning, and I thought everybody was. And I think part of it is he's such a progressive player that I think he looked frustrated and impatient with the way the midfield was clogged and he didn't have room to operate, but he started to suss it out and figure it out. And there was a great ball. Oh, I put it on Twitter. It was late in the game. Might have been like 82nd minute. He's on the right half space in midfield and he's under pressure from two players on either side of him. And he's got his head up and he plays a nice over the top ball into Aubameyang running in behind. And the ball just bounced a little high, like took a weird high bounce. And Aubameyang couldn't quite get his leg to it before the keeper who was coming out got there, but he's got a feel for that over-the-top ball, which I think could be so useful for Aubameyang as teams start playing higher lines, against some of the better teams, and especially as the game is played more on the counter. I think he's showing you really has a feel for that. This is a game he plays 90 minutes, start of the season, after not playing a huge preseason in the rain at Newcastle, and he looked as good as anybody on the pitch, I thought. just 20 years old. It's such a moment for him. Was he potentially, him or Maitland-Niles, but was he potentially man of the match for you?
Yeah, I think so. Because look, I love Maitland-Niles, and we'll talk about him on Wednesday. But if you pull out like two good moments from Maitland-Niles, he had a pretty good game with some solid defending, and he stayed switched on. Whereas you pull out Guendouzi's two best moments of the game, and maybe it's a nature of their roles, but I thought Guendouzi all through the game, especially when, our midfield finally had a little bit of a chance to move the ball around. I mean, he's always got this ability and class, and he can do a part of everything. We really struggled to get something going in the first half, and so it was frustrating, and you could be critical of Guendouzi or any of our midfielders in the first half just trying to progress the ball. But that middle area with 3 or 5 midfielders, if you want to call it that, a bank, and then 3 centre backs behind it. I mean, it was just a logjam in that area, and we all toiled manfully to get the ball going. What was strange was there was no progression between the two midfielders. So Xhaka and Guendouzi themselves didn't really put in a lot of passes to each other, which is really weird. But it just tells you how blocked the middle of the field was. So most of the things Guendouzi did were knocking it back and forward to Maitland-Niles or Mkhitaryan, which is kind of where the frustrations come in, because you have that block midfield, you have Mkhitaryan spilling it. And so a lot of what Guendouzi did in the first half was all for naught. But he does have a really good partnership building with Maitland-Niles, which is likely to be his side going forward. Though him and Xhaka switched for a little while in the second half. Guendouzi went on the left-hand side. And I know one of the analysts thinks Guendouzi is much better suited to being on the left of the midfield, especially when dropping to receive the ball. I don't see it myself, but it's something to watch out for. Whereas with Xhaka in the field, he's always going to be typically on the right here. I thought he was very good, but again, just the struggles in interpreting this game. The second half, things open up. He can start using his movement. I mean, he is a nomad. He doesn't really like to sit back. He's not Willock driving forward, but he likes that ability to go with the ball. Sometimes, though, I think we're a little static because him and Xhaka both kind of like to sit deep and mirror each other. And this was a game where we kind of needed somebody between the lines, and we were pretty conservative in the first half between him and Xhaka. So great, but between the two of them, they didn't really have an answer for us in the first half, and maybe it was just Mkhitaryan spilling the ball the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, nearly moments that a lot of which were thanks to Mkhitaryan just getting his feet confused, unfortunately. But yeah. Can I add one other quick point, which is Willock struggled in the first half. We know that. But it's amazing. And when you have those two players, Mkhitaryan and Willock, struggling, Willock largely because the whole area was just weighed down with opposition players. But it's amazing what we expect when we criticize Willock's performance. It's literally his first ever outing as a number 10 in the Premier League against a 3-5-2 low block, and the one area of the pitch they were determined to lock down, and yet we're still pretty critical of his performance based on what I've seen. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Tim, I guess just speaking of Willock really quickly, to me, I think what this game highlights is that we probably still have a way to go as observers of the game in really appreciating that off the ball skills are skills, right? I mean, it's very easy to spot when someone has a great game on the ball. But it's that whole sort of canard about Ozil, if you can't see what he's doing, you don't understand football. Like, there's sort of a truth to it, though, because sometimes what Ozil does better than anybody else has nothing to do with him being on the ball. It's how he finds space, how he drops in. I mean, we've had a lot of midfielders down the years. I think Arteta was good at that. Just sliding and moving and shuffling his feet and getting into the space to be available for his teammates. And maybe that's the part that Willock doesn't have yet. On the ball, he can drive, he's strong, he's progressive. Off the ball, didn't really seem to find the pockets. I actually thought Nelson had a slightly better game than he did. found space, had some tidy play, a lot of which ended at the feet of Mkhitaryan, unfortunately. But do you think that Willock, and granted, I don't think that Willock is necessarily a 10 anyway, but do you think that his biggest problem in this game was just not being able to find the spaces to be available? Very, very low touch for a midfielder on a team that had 60% possession.
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of that was exacerbated by the way that both of the wingers played. And again, this is where I think we're really starting, to see again the quote unquote Emery ball, the kind of, he stuck with the 4-2-3-1 for most of pre-season. And I think that's what we saw here. And, one of the kind of key facets to it at other clubs is he likes his wide forwards to come in field quite a bit, and that's what they both did. Nelson and Mkhitaryan, they weren't out on the touchline, and I think it takes time as well to get that rhythm and get that sense of which winger comes in and which winger stays out, because they both spent a lot of time quite central, particularly Mkhitaryan, who kept coming in again and again into that kind of number 10 position and actually picking up really good pockets of space. It's just his execution was very bad on the day. But Nelson did it a lot as well, and not just in Newcastle's half, in our half. Mkhitaryan and Nelson really kind of squeezed in and became a much more compact midfield unit. And that can create problems if you're playing as the most advanced player in a central midfield, because suddenly you've got guys coming into your space, basically. So it's difficult to know where to stand and where to run when there's just guys kind of darting in off the flanks into your spaces. And they
bring their markers with them, Tim, as well. So you end up having extra midfielders and centre-backs in your space.
Exactly. Which is, the whole point of that is it's to the avail of players in other areas of the pitch. But yeah, exactly. It means you're playing in a very, very crowded space, both with your own teammates and with the opposition as well. So I think maybe he struggled with that a little bit. I think we saw that with Ceballos as well when he came on. I think he struggled in a similar kind of struggled is probably overstating it, but just getting used to that. Where do I stand? Because where I think I should be standing, I've got a teammate there. So where do I go now? I think that's probably quite a difficult thing to work out, and it takes time. And you're right, Elliot, to say that if anyone can do that, probably Ozil can, because Ozil's whole game, weirdly, is kind of built on running away from the ball and the action and finding where the space is. And I think if you've got Ozil there, he really likes running laterally out to the flanks. That's his whole thing. So I think if he's playing instead of Willock, then you've got Mkhitaryan coming in, Ozil going out. But I don't think that's really a feature of Willock's game at this point. So I think maybe he had some understandable struggles in that respect, to be honest with you. And one of the things he did really well in pre-season was kind of running beyond the striker, but it didn't seem like there was as much call for that in this game.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me when I watch this game back is the first half really had a lot of players trying to figure out what they were looking at with Newcastle in front of them and that congested midfield. And then also players just settling into being in the Premier League. I mean, you have a lot of guys out there in Chambers, still Maitland-Niles to some extent, still Guendouzi, who's only 20, Nelson, a lot of guys out there who are just trying to adjust and not let the moment overwhelm them. It's the first game of a new season. It's away. The weather's terrible. You're at a tough ground, admittedly not a full ground at its absolute pomp. But then by the second half, and once we took the lead, I thought there was a little more ability to express ourselves in terms of the space that was available on the pitch. It was always going to be tricky. Clive, before we move on to talk about Aubameyang and wrap up with some of the substitutes, I mean, as far as the way we played and trying to find spaces in midfield and some of the challenges that I thought Willock faced, for example, do you think that the way we played made it a little more difficult to progress the ball through midfield generally?
I thought we progressed the ball nicely. What I didn't think we did enough of, I didn't think we were brave enough to penetrate in the final third. I still felt we had a false control. Maybe that's the nervous fan at me at 0-0, wanting us to just go and get a goal so I can relax. But I just feel we played the game in a bit of a playerish way, just keeping the ball, moving it around, building play, tip-tap, tip-tap. I understand we are practicing our shape, practicing our distances, by being compact. The key thing is, even from your left back to your right winger, it's almost like a swarm of bees moving around in a lump, keeping those distances really small. You've got to be fit to do that. And we had our fittest team, and we were able to be compact shape-wise. That's great. But then when you have the ball, the trick is to expand. I didn't think we expanded aggressively enough. I didn't think we drove enough. I think, I'm not saying it's Willock's fault. I thought he did fine. I thought he cut off passing lanes. I felt more secure with him there. I just couldn't take my eyes off him, his ability to move and run and just create disruption. Come on, guys. If you watched Aaron Ramsey do that for last season, he just creates disruption.
Well,
gets
after
6
he
goals.
had that play, right? He lost the ball, and then he sprints about 15 yards to hook, slide, tackle the ball away to start the play that led to Mkhitaryan's blast over from a good position. That comes from Willock recovering the ball.
Yeah, can you remember what Ramsey did against Tottenham? We just tackling somebody, intercepting a pass, quick release to a forward, Lacazette goal. It's you have different types of 10. I noticed yesterday that Spurs played Lamela at 10. So they had a pressing, running, aggressive 10. And, they had Eriksen in behind him late in the game, So it's like there are different ways to do it. Sometimes, Klopp always says your pressing 10 is like your playmaker. Again, what happened? We transitioned the goal. We nicked it. We drove. I think Willock was put on the pitch to create those transitions. It didn't happen for him on the day, but he had a great 1 hour. And that's a perfect way to use a youth player. Fit, quick, sharp, ready to play. 1 hour, go and smash it, go and tear them up. Don't worry about execution, just make sure we're in the game. Drive, move people around, disrupt, and that'll create space for the killer up front, which we have. I'm telling you, Elliot, I'm telling you, mate, this is good. This is good. If we can be more aggressive in the last third, and we've got those players sitting on the bench spot, so it's not a problem. If we can be more aggressive and a little bit more sure in the last third, we all know about the accuracy of certain touches, but the base is there. I tell you, man, I'm really excited as we build on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a whole season of it, Clive, so I assure you will get your chance. I think, Paul, before I come back to you just real quick, because I had wanted to ask Tim about this. I mean, Tim, I want to know if you feel, from the fans you go to the ground with, the away fans, whatever, there, to me, has never been enough appreciation for Aubameyang since he arrived. And I understand, he arrived in a January window after we'd just gotten Lacazette, and it was Arsenal's last season, and it was kind of chaotic, and last season wasn't a great season, and he missed some big chances, and people remember those. But for me, he's the best player at the club. It's not close. We win when he scores. He scores big goals. He scores great goals. His movement is unparalleled. I thought he had some runs in this game that were just absolute extraordinary movement. He could have had more goals. Sometimes the ball slipped away from him on a couple occasions, and Mkhitaryan missed a few chances where we were counterattacking. But I just thought he was brilliant, and he takes the goal so brilliantly. There was also the one he took down with the outside of his right foot and swiveled on it and blasted it in the keeper that I thought was really well done. I mean, do you get the sense that people are coming around to appreciating that Aubameyang is our all-conquering center forward now?
Slowly, yes. I actually think there was kind of people were starting to turn on him maybe after the Spurs penalty miss last season, which I kind of get because that's
I do not like people.
There are a few more emotive kind of moments than missing a stoppage time penalty away at Spurs. If anything's going to do you in, that's going to do you in. I think we've spoken about this before, like for some reason there's this idea that players have to compete against each other for our affections. We can't just be happy to have two good players. Like they've got to be in competition, and we've got to back one horse over the other and all of that. And I'd say Lacazette is still more popular. There was a new song for him that might kind of explain a little bit why, but it was still his name that was being sung while he was warming up below us. But I do think at the end of last season, and maybe like with that Valencia game, for example, and getting the golden boot, people had started to realise with Aubameyang really in this game, I think with this game as well, this is exactly what top class strikers do. They fighting on scraps, really. The team's a little bit undercooked, missing quite a few players. Perhaps the creative side of the game's not quite there. It's the first game of the season. Nothing's really clicked yet. It's a fairly even kind of game, but he wins it for you with pretty much the only decent chance of the game for either team. Just absolutely expert. As soon as Maitland-Niles has sensed the danger, he's seen the opportunity. He knows exactly what's going to unfold. And to be fair, I think Jamal Lascelles for Newcastle really does him a massive favour by going walkabout for reasons I can't quite get my head around, and kind of leaves him free. But, just that kind of, I stay on side. No need for me to run ahead of the defender here. I've got everything sized up. I know exactly how the ball's coming in. I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. And it's just that moment of quality in front of goal that, players like that and we haven't had that since Van Persie, I don't think. And I was looking at you look at Chelsea and Man United kicking off later in the day, and Chelsea are playing Tammy Abraham up front and then bringing on Giroud, and Man United kind of really, really have thrown their lot in with Marcus Rashford, and just thinking, we're like, we've got an embarrassment of riches here up front. In terms of the top six, obviously you look at like Aguero and Gabriel Jesus, and that's incredible. And Liverpool, everyone knows about their front three. But, in terms of centre forwards, after years of really, really struggling to figure out this position because we didn't have a top class option there, we've solved that problem. Like, Aubameyang, it's Aguero, Kane, Aubameyang. Those are the names that roll off your tongue in terms of, the best strikers in the Premier League. And it's because, like you say, they're the ones that are decisive, that win you games, exactly like Harry Kane did for Spurs on Saturday. I watched that game. He barely kicked the fucking ball. He was, again, a little bit undercooked, basically invisible for most of the game. But once the ball broke to him in the 85th minute, bang, that's it, game won. And that's what that level of player does for you. And if, Arsenal talking about getting to the next level and getting back into the top four, how many years did someone like Van Persie do that for us? Just by dint of having a striker like that, you can cover a lot of ills, basically. And this wasn't a great performance. I wasn't, by the whole team, I wasn't expecting it to be. Lots of players missing. Everyone's a bit undercooked on the first game of the season. It's all about just getting through it and getting the result. And when you've got a striker like that, you're much more likely to get the result.
He's the fucking balls. He's so good. There's 5 teams in the world maybe that wouldn't start him at center forward if he was on their team, and I'm not even sure there's that many. I think he is the thing that makes us different from the other teams competing for those top 4 positions other than Liverpool and City. And I guess you could say Kane, although I think Kane could be in trouble with the ankle situation. We'll see. But, Clive always says it. How does he make you feel? And when I saw that lineup, I had a bit of nervousness. Of course I did. First of all, it's me. I'm just nervous. That's why my friends call me Whiskers. But by the way, if you want to look that up, that's a Saturday Night Live thing. But the way he makes you feel is you see that lineup and you see names like Nelson and Willock and Maitland-Niles and Chambers, and you still have that thought in your head where you're like, no, Aubameyang will get a goal. He'll find a way. We'll score. He just makes you feel so confident that you're going to get a goal, that there's going to be a winner in it for you because he's so superior. And I'm so excited to watch him this season because he was ripping it up in preseason. I see nothing to suggest that isn't representative of the way he's tuned up for this season. I think when guys like Pepe, who can create more space, get out there, when maybe Ozil plays a little bit, when we have a little bit more preparation under our belt and those final balls are a little sharper, he's just going to devastate defenses this season. I can't wait to see it. We'll wrap up with a talk about some of the subs who got on. And Paul, I want to quickly talk about Ceballos. I thought it was a really, really interesting cameo for him because he comes onto the pitch and in the first 5 minutes, he basically gave the ball away 4 times, including the cardinal sin of a square ball right across his midfield in his own half that he lived to tell the tale of. Then I thought he started to wake up and start to find the pockets of space and dart and drive a little bit, but it was a little uneven for him in that respect. I mean, did you get a sense that maybe the moment was just a bit much for him when he came on and then he settled in? How'd you feel about I think fair to say, sort of uneven substitute appearance for him?
Yeah, look, his first few minutes, I actually liked it because his passes were shit, but he came out all guns blazing. So he knows.
That's the spin I was looking for.
Yeah. I mean, right from the get-go, and there was that square ball that nearly totally fucked us. And he's like, oh, fuck it, that's your problem. And he just kept going the rest of the game for the 20 minutes or so he was on with Ceballos-style football. I mean, we had a debate a few days ago about whether he plays risky passes or not. And I think he plays quite risky passes the whole time. He doesn't always go for the knockout punch. He's not the guy putting in the assists or streaking into the box. But he played in an absolute Ceballos kind of way where he kind of came on as the attacking midfielder, but he dropped right deep, picked up the ball, got us going upfield, kicked off a breakaway, then kind of settles into that area just to the left of their penalty box where kind of Ramsey style, he's connecting passes with other people, trying to get other people going into the box. And always quicker tempo, quicker passing, tricks, flicks, kind of calculated risks. And I love watching it. I think it's exciting. I think in a way he did for us what Mkhitaryan was trying to do but wasn't pulling off. Mkhitaryan's more aggressive in going into the box and trying to get on the end of shots, etc. But Ceballos, I thought, I was pretty excited about his 20 minutes because he looked like I hope he'd look, and he didn't back off. You know, you screw up the first two or three things in your first game in shitty weather when you're used to the beautiful blue skies of Spain, and you come to our preseason and it seemed like we were able to match that promise. The next thing you're up there with playing against Almiron, who looks like an amphibian in about 2 feet of water. And you said about their attack being toothless. He's not supposed to have any teeth. He's an amphibian. And,
it's come off the rails, Paul.
Yeah. And Ceballos he's just straight in there doing his thing. I thought it was great. I thought Martinelli similarly had fewer minutes, but he did Martinelli stuff and went straight forward. So kind of to Clive's point earlier, I think this was although not the most enjoyable performance, I think the individual elements of it can all be construed pretty positively for what we're looking for from these players.
I got two more things before we say goodbye. One, Clive, is one that I was really excited to talk to you about, and that is Pepe, because, look, all right, he doesn't come on and light the world on fire. He had one really, really good drop of the shoulder that left a guy for dead down the right wing. He had another strong dribble in our own half of the right wing, protecting the ball, where he got a foul call, where if the ref plays on, we're off and running the other way. But the thing that I thought was most interesting about his appearance was he spent a lot of time in central spaces playing as center forward, and he and Aubameyang switched quite a bit. And I wonder if Emery's looking at this and saying, we're going to have a fluid front three, and that when it's Pepe, Lacazette, and Aubameyang, they're going to kind of flip-flop and sort it out, and sometimes it'll be chalk on the boots for Pepe dribbling by people, and sometimes it'll be running off the shoulder of the last defender. He made a couple really, really good last shoulder runs. One that Aubameyang tried to pick out, but it got cut out by a defender. The other, on a counterattack, Aubameyang was on the right wing and floated one to Pepe, who was center of the box, but he didn't get it over the defender. Do you see, based on a very, very, very small sample size of the 20 minutes he played, that potentially he's going to get some chances to play through the middle and flip around with the other forwards?
Absolutely. I think what's really exciting, I think Aubameyang has improved on build-up play. When he first came, I felt when he used to receive the ball back to goal, I used to worry about him. I don't think he liked it. I think he was concerned about the physicality, but now he's much more comfortable receiving the ball back to goal. So that's not a problem where he plays. He can go back to goal, he can receive it wide, he can go straight down the middle. Done. We know Lacazette can do this. We know that he can peel into wide areas, inverted shots on the left-hand side. We know he goals like against Cardiff on the right-hand side of the box. No problems there. Physically strong. Again, for Pepe, he can receive it back to goal. He can drive inside. He can run through lines. He can receive it standing still. But he's probably the best dribbler of the three, just on a straight dribble. So now you have three forwards with all-round ability. Why would you stand in the same place? Absolutely not. You just rotate, you run out of space, run into it and cross over. It's going to be so exciting to see how they coexist together. Got no idea how it's going to happen. We've all got a sort of a little bit of a view. If you write a team sheet down, in possession, Lacazette as a 9.5 and the other two on the either side, they won't stay there. We know that. I'd like to see them higher. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got the all-round ability to do everything, which I think these three have. Lacazette may not be the top-end speed of the other two, but he can do things the others can't do on pressing and recovery tackles, etc. Just like Firmino does for Liverpool. So, mate, just enjoy the journey. It's going to be exciting to see how often the three are deployed together, how they coexist. If that's the first sign on positional freedom that Pepe was given from that side, that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
And that means he's been asked to do this. If you feel it, go. Just go into those areas. And when the others get to recognise and see those runs, we're in for some fun, aren't we? Can't wait.
Yeah, the only thing I would say from his debut, and again, such a small sample size, this is not a judgment, just a quick observation, is just he did walk back a few times. And there was one situation where his man just ran right by him, and Maitland-Niles had to defend two guys in the box, and did a really nice job of it, actually. But you know, that's the kind of thing that Emery is definitely going to drill out of him, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to leave it with you, Tim, on an issue that I'm loath to bring it up because it does feel like kicking a guy when he's down now, but I think it's worth a mention. This wound up being a very professional, focused performance. The thing I loved about it is we seemed switched on for 90 minutes in the rain, away, defended well, had good resolve. I'm not saying Newcastle was good. I'm not saying they tested us. But by and large, there was real commitment and professionalism to seeing out the result. Mustafi was not in the team. He was left out entirely, and I think we are trying to shift him, obviously. But, you know, do you think that the reality is that there are certain players that have been in this squad that have been prone to doing things that take these kinds of games away from us, and that it's time for us to separate ourselves? And the most obvious version of that is Mustafi, and that the fact that he wasn't in there is sort of telling that on a day when the weather was against us and the result was hard fought and we had to show concentration and commitment for 90 minutes, the guy who so often cost us those games wasn't there. I mean, is it fair to say that moving away from him is a part of getting these kind of results on a more regular basis?
Yeah, I think so. And it's clear that the club have made their mind up on this now, and now we're getting into, you know, it's clear they've been willing to sell him all summer, whether they haven't had the offers or he hasn't had the desire to go. Now they're basically moving into that space where they're just making things uncomfortable for him, to try and make him go. It's kind of an unseemly side, I guess, of football, but kind of
it happens the other way. It happens the other way. Players do it to teams. You know, we saw it with Koscielny, right? I mean,
Yep. And if he'd been playing out of his skin for the last 2 years, you know, he'd be asking for a contract. So yeah, exactly. But I mean, look, they're trying to push him out, aren't they? Basically, they've made it public now. Emery said, I've told him a couple of times, and you know, not including him in the 18. And it's, you know, we had Luiz on the bench. We didn't have another defender. So that's a kind of, look, you are absolutely not a part of the plans anymore. And you know, if I'm kind of wary about saying this because I kind of feel like it's me, or it's something that we all say to try and make ourselves feel better on, you know, the kind of the human side of just utterly rejecting a player who, you know, for his faults, he's never done anything, you know, disrespectful to the club or anything like that, as far as I know. Always gives his best and everything like that. And so when I say something like, oh, it's best for him to move on now, I wonder if like a part of that is me just alleviating my
Guilt.
I guess guilt, yeah, for just being like, you're rubbish and I don't want you at my club. It's in your best interest, It's not you, it's me.
Tim, if you're bad at making the French fries at McDonald's, you need to move on. Like, there's nothing wrong with thinking a multi-millionaire professional footballer who has made a very good living off the club while not playing very well needs to move on. Like, I don't think that makes you a monster. Threatening him, trolling him, adding him on Twitter to tell him he's shit. That makes you a monster. Well, maybe not a monster, but a cunt. But no, wanting him to go because he's not good does not make you a monster.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. And look, he's lost it. He lost his place in the Germany team quite a while ago before the last World Cup. So it's not like, the world is kind of noticing. And look, he's played in Germany, he's played in Italy, he's played in Spain. He's got like a rounded kind of education in terms of football, and surely that means he can go anywhere really, because that gives him a lot of options. And it's weird, isn't it? Because there was that story 2 years ago about how his family weren't really settled here, and it looked like he might go. I can only imagine things settled down there. But yeah, I think at this stage you really have to say, look, from our point of view, from Arsenal's, yes, we absolutely have to move on from him ASAP and try and get some money for him if we can. I really hope, I suspect he might go on loan or something, which I really wouldn't like. I think it's time for a clean break. But I mean, he must be looking at this and thinking, right, I lost my place in my international team over a year ago now. I'm now not even getting in the 18. I'm behind Callum Chambers. I'm definitely behind Rob Holding. I'm definitely behind David Luiz. The writing's on the wall here. So, yes, I can ride this out for another year because my contract's nice. But then next year, I'm just going to have the same problem. And it's going to be even more difficult to get a good contract at my next club because I've not been playing and I've been ostracised and my reputation is even more damaged. I think sometimes you've got to take the long view and think, okay, I might go to Monaco or something and I might not get paid quite as much. But if I wait another year, it's not going to be Monaco knocking with 70 grand a week. It's going to be it's going to be less than that. So, and he's not, he's still in his 20s. He can rescue his top level career at this stage, but I don't think he can do that at Arsenal at this stage. And it's just in everybody's interests if he moves on, his included.
As a famous singer and podcast host once said, he will survive. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said, and hopefully he agrees, because it ultimately will depend on whether he does. So let's leave it there. I have to move on from you guys because Scott is chomping at the bit to give us 15 minutes of the data that matters and invalidates everything we've said in this segment. So remember, coming up for patrons midweek is our match spotlight, Ainsley Maitland-Niles. That should be Wednesday, and really excited to do that. There'll be video associated with it, data associated with it, obviously the podcast itself. So if you'd like to sign up, we would love that. There's a fantasy league going on there. The Discord chat has been so much fun. On match day, it was just crazy fun. People contributing so much there. So if you'd like to join, that'd be great. If you don't want to join, don't do it. No big deal. We love having you here. We're going to do lots of pods here, and we're going to do lots of YouTube stuff and all kinds of stuff. So thank you so much. We'll take a break. We'll come back with Scott. But first, I'm going to say goodbye to Paul. He's on Twitter at Pause Into My Pants. Thanks, Pause.
Woohoo.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim's on Twitter at Stillberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Take a break. Come back with Scott. Stay with us. Okay, we're back, and now we have saved the best for last, as they say. We have done it. Scott is here. You can find him on Twitter at _that_crab. Hello, Scott.
Yeehaw!
Yeehaw, indeed. Hey, just before we get into the data, we won. Are you happy? Did you enjoy the start of the season?
Yeah, very much so. I got up early. I actually probably kind of cut it a little bit close, only getting up 5 minutes before kickoff. So I was scrambling to get the coffee poured and the TV all set up and ready to go. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
win. The game wasn't super fun, but it was fun to win.
It's funny because I often have to cut it close to make it to the TV. And then, I'll tell that to Tim and he's like, well, I had to take a train to a bus to another train. And the good news is he's going to be posting some of his pictures and videos this season of the trip to the stadium and the time in the stadium on Patreon. So I will be able to see what it's like to have to make that journey while being in my pajamas on my couch. So that's good. Let's dive into this thing. The stats first, and the one that we always lead with. I know not everybody loves them, but it's a good way to evaluate chances in a game. What was the XG for this one, buddy?
Yeah, so this one was a pretty good one. So Arsenal ended up, let's see, let me pull it up. I had it on a different screen here. It was 1.09 to 0.6 in my model.
To point what? 0.6?
0.6.
Okay.
So Arsenal won to about a half a goal.
So obviously 1 isn't phenomenal, but it's the 0.6 that interests me. Last season, we weren't putting up those kind of defensive numbers. Would that have been one of our better defensive away performances last season?
It certainly would have been, yeah. So, and one of the things too is that Arsenal really stopped attacking after they got the goal. There was a couple of kind of dangerous opportunities where they were looking to counter, but they kind of sat back and held things after they got the goal, and I think it actually worked out pretty well. I don't ever really felt that that Newcastle was going to score after Arsenal did. It all felt pretty good. I think there was maybe a phase somewhere in that first half where Newcastle were a little bit threatening. But other than that, maybe the Ceballos giveaway, that was the only time that I kind of got a little nervous. But other than that, Arsenal did pretty well holding on to the lead.
It helps when you have 0 expected Mustafis. So we had 0 expected Mustafis on the day, which was good. So let's talk shots for a second. I mean, we know we need to get more shots. We know we need to concede fewer shots. We accomplished one of those things. Shots for, shots against. How do you feel about that? We didn't take many, but we didn't concede many.
Yeah, and so the other thing too is that so Arsenal did still do the thing where they looked for good shots instead of trying to do kind of the speculative shot kind of taking. So Arsenal probably had 3 good chances in the match. So there was the first one to Mkhitaryan, and then 2 that fell to Aubameyang. And thankfully they were efficient with their chances. So I mean, if you're gonna look for shots, you're gonna want to look for higher quality ones. So overall, that's at least something. Yeah, I had Aubameyang with a 0.2 xG per shot for his 4 shots today. So
20% chances are pretty good. He finished with about 0.7-ish, something like that for the game.
I had him at just under 1. I think it was like 0.95.
That's fantastic. I mean, just to put that in perspective for people who are new to this stuff, if you're a 1 xG per game per 90 player, you're the best in Europe or right there behind like the likes of Messi and Ronaldo, who don't count because they break models. But all right, so as far as the shot suppression, Newcastle never really threatened us based on the eye test, but based on the data, that's pretty much held up as well, right?
Yeah, I think they had one. Yeah, they had one kind of decent chance, but other than that, there really wasn't too much. I think they might have had a couple of dangerous situations that they didn't quite get shots on. I think there was one where they kind of had was it off a set play where there was one that kind of bounced around in the box, but then Leno was able to grab it, but they never really kind of got a shot on it. But other than that, I think it was a well-played defensive game. I was actually pretty surprised by that. Chambers and Socrates did well. I think that Xhaka and Guendouzi did pretty well shielding the back 4. I mean, there's not a lot to complain about when you get a clean sheet, and it's a pretty well earned clean sheet.
Yeah, I think overall the attack will liven up too. I mean, you look at who was playing out there, and obviously we were far from full strength. So as far as the individual players, offensive value added, XG chain, XG, all that. Who were the stars for Arsenal in terms of the attack?
Aubameyang led in my offensive value added. Surprisingly, second was Nacho Monreal. Then we had Reece Nelson actually came up really well. He was third. Then Ainsley Maitland-Niles. So there was a good kind of mixture all around. So on the offensive value added, I had it 1.19 for Arsenal. And then let's see, Newcastle was 0.6. So pretty well matching the XG.
And I'm guessing one of the reasons Nacho came off looking pretty good is he did have the little square, or not square, it was kind of a cut back to Mkhitaryan
the one to
for the one that he blasted.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, Mkhitaryan.
It was the Mkhitaryan blast over right with his left, and that was a really good chance.
Yeah, that was a really well.
Yeah,
and he was in his overall passing was quite good. Didn't have a lot of giveaways on there. So he had good freedom to actually carry the ball down the.
Yeah. Anyone on your
hand side as well.
Anyone that you look at that maybe statistically speaking, I'm not asking for your opinion of their performance, just statistically when you look at it, from a strictly statistical standpoint, is there anyone that when you look at it you say, you know what, they were sort of disappointing. I'm not particularly happy with what I'm seeing from them statistically.
I don't want to beat up on him, but I didn't think Joe Willock had as good of a game as some people were saying.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that he really had, troubles getting involved in the game. I think his touches overall was about, he had less than 20, I believe. I don't have it in front of me, but he didn't really get a ton of the ball. It was definitely another game where a lot of Arsenal's buildup went out to the wings, and we kind of bypassed that central middle third and final third section. So I think that was one that, in preseason he played a little bit deeper, and he was definitely able to get more into the game. And then Mkhitaryan always has his hit and miss kind of thing. So he was kind of a bit of a disappointment. But yeah, those are the two that really kind of stick out to me.
When you try to analyze someone like Mkhitaryan, he had something like 15 giveaways, which is astonishing, but also a couple of good balls into Aubameyang behind, plus the really good shot. I'm curious, when you look at something like XG chain or offensive value added for Mkhitaryan, who everybody who watched knows he struggled. He struggled to control the ball. He struggled to complete passes. I think he was one of our lower passing percentage guys in the game, along with Willock, actually, ironically. But he also did things that probably look pretty decent on something like XG chain or offensive value added. So does the data maybe overemphasize the quality of his game, or can you see that he got things wrong? I mean, if I only had a spreadsheet to look at and hadn't watched the game, would I come off thinking Mkhitaryan was maybe better than he was, or no?
I mean, I think you'd probably see that he came out to be about a 0. So, and that's really what the model gives him. His passing was a negative. His shooting was a positive based on his, one really good chance that he was able to find himself in. His ball carrying was about a 0. I mean, he, gave the ball away, but he completed a few, decent carries of the ball. So that kind of broke out to a 0. All in all, he's about a 0 overall. He gave some, he, took some.
And it's sort of interesting, right? Because that sums up the problem with Mkhitaryan. He's going to get the simple things wrong. He's going to be sloppy. But he's going to do things carrying the ball or getting shots or playing a final ball that you really need in a team. It's just you wish you could cut out the sloppiness, because especially when you're defensively vulnerable, you just can't afford to be handing the opposition those chances to attack you like that. So I guess it's pretty interesting to look at who the good players were, who the weaker players were, but maybe not super surprising that it comes out to be basically what the eye test tells you. So then as we move on a little bit, I mean, just in terms of your opinion, because I don't just want to restrict this to the data, and it's early in the season, and you can jump to a lot of conclusions just looking at data specifically, but were there any players on the pitch that for you really stood out that were the stars of the game for you?
I really do go back to Aubameyang. So on a game when Arsenal really were kind of searching for offensive players, he was the one guy that was there and was making plays. He had 4 shots, which is half of Arsenal's total. And that's actually probably above kind of what his, average per 90 would be. So he kind of stepped up, took some shots. Most of them were good shots. All of them were inside of the box. He had a few of them that were a little bit wider, but overall really good shots. So that was something that's a really big positive for me. I know he's had a really, really impressive preseason. So it's nice to see him being able to continue that going into the season. And I think that, Newcastle was basically able to key on him the entire time. So they had their 5 defenders, and it was basically just him up there by himself. And, him still being able to do that, find the space with his movement, was very impressive. And I can imagine, what it's going to be like when he has Pepe out there, when he has Lacazette, when he has Ozil. And he's just going to be able to, hopefully be able to take that to the next level, or at least just make it a little bit easier for him where, the defense isn't able to key on him and try to shut him down. So I think that was a huge positive.
As far as just let's look beyond Arsenal just a little bit. You, in preseason, we talked to you about your model that predicts where teams are going to finish. And we talked about what the model takes into account, what the model doesn't take into account. So we understand that it has limitations, but it did sort of like Chelsea. I think it liked them to be top 4. Have you updated? I know it's one game, but every week you usually put out top 4 chances, where everybody can finish your whole table matrix. Have you looked at it yet? And is Chelsea already taking a beating for the beating they took, or not yet?
So I imagine they'll get a little bit of a ding in their rating, but it's just one match. So It typically weights things so after about 10 matches that's going to be equal to what we had last season. So this will be 1/10 of that weighting. And then as the season goes on, the current season will take even more, importance. So that will probably skew it a little bit, but I don't imagine it's going to be a huge, dent to them. I guess, kind of thinking about it, the expected points that they were expected to get out of the match was probably closer to 1.3, 1.6. So not getting those points will hurt them in the model's eyes. So that will probably see them go down. So that's definitely a good thing for Arsenal. Manchester United looked pretty good.
I disagree.
Overall, their counterattacking I thought was pretty good, but also is that because Chelsea's defense was bad? Maybe
Yes.
David Luiz was the answer to that defense and made it work.
Zuma was just a dumpster fire. I mean, that game was fun for me because what I saw was a Manchester United team that has basically no midfield and not a lot of good defensive pressure. I mean, you can sit in their final third unpressured and just pick passes, which Chelsea didn't have the end product to do because their team's not particularly effective going forward. And it also made me happy because Chelsea just looked like shit. And granted, Rudiger will come back and replace Zuma, I would imagine, but their defense looked terrible. Zuma was a dumpster fire. They handed them a few goals. Pogba is a cheat code, and he can really change the complexion of a game. But outside of that, I saw two pretty mediocre teams.
Yeah, not impressed with Pereira or McTominay. Neither of those were especially good for me. And I guess they're better than Fred and definitely better than Matic. So not exactly confidence inspiring.
Yeah, and Wan-Bissaka, look, he did all right defensively, but like everybody's going to do all right defensively against Chelsea. He gave nothing going forward too, which is encouraging because I think in the modern NFL, if you can't NFL, did I say that? Wow, where did that come from?
Wrong sport.
In the modern Premier League, it's funny. Someone literally just
Stupid
texted me
American.
while we were. I stick to football. I guess it's all football. There you go. It works. In the modern Premier League, if you can't attack using your fullbacks to support the attack, you're really limited. That's a really important part of the modern Premier League because it's just harder and harder and harder to pick teams apart right through the middle. So I think Wan-Bissaka maybe not being an effective attacker is going to limit United as well. Look, I know they got 4 goals and they beat Chelsea confidently and comfortably. So saying that they didn't look great is a little weird. But for me, I did not see anything to be super encouraged about for either of those teams, really.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that I had that one a lot closer than what the final scoreline ended up being. Let me see if I still have it up here for what I had the actual scoreline. No, I closed that earlier so I could prepare for this.
What a mistake!
But yeah,
never prepare.
I know.
Mm-hmm. I don't.
I think I had it closer to about 3 to 1.5 or something like that. So Chelsea, not scoring was probably unfortunate, and 4 goals, including a penalty, is a little bit high. So without that penalty, it's probably closer to 2.2 to 1.5. So a rather close match instead of one that's rather lopsided.
I cannot wait for a week of United getting pumped up by the pundits, only for them to lose at Wolves next Monday on Monday Night Football. So that should be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's leave it there. We've got a long season, a lot of data to dig into, and we're going to be having you on Wednesday on the Patreon pod for the match spotlight of Maitland-Niles. So we'll save it for that. Scott's on Twitter at _that_crab. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Great to talk to you, man. New season. You excited? You feeling good? Off the schneid, 1 win, and on we go. Onward and upward.
Yeah, I think we're looking good for reaching the goals and making the top 4.
I'll take it. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review. Write nasty things about pretty much me. I mean, why not? You've been doing it anyway, so why not continue with a good thing? But I'm excited. As I said earlier in the pod, we're so happy to have you with us for another season. We love you. We're looking forward to what should hopefully be, I think, a fun season. I'm going to stay optimistic for now. We're 1 game in. Why not? We won a game. So, yeah, I think it's going to be good. And the best part about it is we still haven't seen some of the players we're most fired up to watch. So there's a lot to be encouraged about. But we'll leave it there. A lot more to come. Can't wait to talk to you next time. We will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Burnley 0.